First guest this evening, eminently qualified to comment on all of this. He's Colonel Daniel L. Davis, amongst other things, the host of the excellent Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Colonel Davis, thank you for joining us again on the mother of all talk shows. These are desperate times, are they not?
They are certainly fraught with risk. And by the way, thanks for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to be on with you.
Thank you. They're fraught with risk, but the risk is easily accessed, isn't it? It's easily established. Putin said if you do this, the response will be condign. We did it. And so we must expect Putin to keep his word, mustn't we?
Well, there are a couple of caveats. Yesterday, Sergei Lavrov went on to reiterate some of the positions they've had before, but made sure everybody's very clear on them, that Russia will act in accordance with its national security interest. Based on this fact, he just brushed away this ridiculous, absurd statement by the national security advisor for Joe Biden, Jake Sullivan, who yesterday said, oh, well, I mean, if they use these missiles, it's not us. We're not doing it. They're doing it on their own. And he said, yeah, that's ridiculous. We know the truth. It can't fire without your direct participation. But that caveat that it would be in accordance with their national security, I think is leading them to not take any action as of this moment. And here's the unexpected reason why. So far, at least according to reports that we've had, none of these missiles that have been fired, whether it's the ATACMS or the Storm Shadow missiles, have actually hit anything, because the Russians have figured out how to shoot them down and how to use electronic warfare to make them not hit their targets. And it's definitely not in Russia's interest. They don't want to expand this war, but if they get hit and hurt, then I think that you are going to see them. I don't consider this a bluff by Putin at all. If any of these missiles, if they keep firing them and something gets through and something important gets hit, then I think you are going to see something in the West get hit as well, and then we will have this humongous risk for escalation into direct war between the United States and Russia. And then whether it goes nuclear on that, it starts to, the chances start going through the roof, because there's emotional men involved and some irrational ones, frankly, on the Western side. And so, yeah, I do worry a whole lot about it. We just have to hope that we can get 60 more days, because I think that's the other reason that Putin is not done anything yet. Because if he can, he would rather get to a place where he at least has a partner that's willing to talk to him, because President Biden has not been willing to. And how can you get anything done if you're not even willing to talk to somebody that you want to have a deal with? And that's one of our biggest failures, I believe.
Well, I want to come to that, Colonel, but are you telling me that the British taxpayer just spent £7 million in the firing of 12 Storm Shadow missiles, none of which hit anything?
According to the information we have so far, that is the report. It's always subject to change, and once they start getting some satellite imagery, perhaps that could change. But as of right now, nothing has been hit of any substance.
It's the very definition of burning money, isn't it? Let's move then to the second track that you referred to, Colonel. This is all being done to torpedo the second Trump presidency, isn't it?
Whether it was intentional or not, that is definitely the risk that we're facing, because if by taking this very provocative action, and that's, by the way, was accelerated a little more today when President Biden authorized the use of certain kinds of landmines that violate our own policy that we had not done. So it really does give the impression that they are trying to stoke something up so that the United States could not reach any kind of a negotiated settlement. You had the NATO Secretary General Rutte yesterday still claiming that we're going to give all this stuff that we can to the Ukraine side so that they can prevail, so that Russia will lose. And I've just got to tell you, I don't know what kind of delusional mentality could be going on in Brussels when they're still talking about victory, when the only question is how bad is Ukraine going to lose, not whether.
Well, you're an eminent soldier. Even I was a boy soldier. Mark Runt of NATO is a former perfume salesman. and a failed politician in the mighty Netherlands. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He has no background, knowledge, experience. He's never heard a gun fired in anger because, of course, he's against hunting. But the truth is, these NATO wallahs, and Runta himself said that he would personally expel the United States from NATO if it abandoned Ukraine. They are living in a land of delusion, are they not?
Well, I would imagine that President Trump might be happy to hear that if he thinks that NATO wants to let go of the United States and all the money and all the support that we have provided. I think most of them are actually afraid that might happen. But if he wants to go down that path, I mean, why not? You know, and that really highlights another issue that is very much related to this, and that is if the Western European countries are so concerned about whether or not Ukraine wins or loses, then one would wonder why they're not giving out a whole lot more support. And I'm not just talking about money, but I'm talking about military support. And the fact that they don't want to diminish their own national resources and their own defense capacity, in my view, puts the truth to what they really believe, and that they don't think that Russia is going to come roll into the West, that they're going to roll through Ukraine, that they're going to hit into the Baltics or the Poland or anything else, because they don't have the capacity or the interest to do that. What they do want is security on their border, and that's what they have been unambiguous about since before the war, all the way back to 2014 and beyond, really, all the way back to 2008. When the NATO expansion was going on, Russia said, this is our red line. This is the problem. And it's not just NATO on the border, which they do have in the Baltics. As bad as that is, NATO in Ukraine has always been the non-negotiable because it is on a plane that has basically an arrow pointing right to Moscow that a ground force could use if they wanted to invade, which has happened twice before in the previous 2 centuries. So it's a real big issue for Russia and something that's well known by our side. So I don't know why we keep thinking that Russia would respond differently than we would if it was Russia or China on a direct path to either London or Washington.
Now, on that subject of Washington, Colonel, this is, by any measure, you said 60 days. We had a Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, I wish he was here now, who said a week's a long time in politics. And that's when things moved a lot slower than they do today. Joe Biden and his administration, whoever's working him, whoever's operating his buttons, can do a lot of damage in 60 days without having to take responsibility for any of the consequences of what they do. Isn't there something fundamentally undemocratic about that? And why doesn't somebody do something about it?
Well, it is certainly it's both unprecedented and it's irrational, and it's you can even, I think, go so far as to say unethical, because you're taking action. And you're right. I totally agree that 60 days might seem short in one circumstance, but it's an eternity in another. Especially you see the speed which the administration first let the long-range missiles go, and now that it's today added this issue of the landmines, et cetera. And I actually published a piece earlier this afternoon in the National Interest warning about these very issues right now. Because if anything happens because of these actions, it's not going to be the Biden administration that has to pay the price for it. It's going to be tying the hands of the Trump administration, who was voted by the American people to come in and bring peace to this situation. He declared he would do that in stark contrast to his opponent, and that's why and one of the reasons, anyway, why the American people voted for him. And for now, then, this administration, the outgoing, to take action which could precipitate an expansion of the war so that it would prevent the incoming administration to do what the people of America hired him to do, I think is very problematic and alarming. And it's unfortunately not just in this theater. You can also look at what's going on in the Middle East, and it's not at all uncertain that that thing couldn't explode in the next 60 days as well, also tying Trump's hands into some real problems. Of course, and that means throwing it on all of our backs in the United States. So there is some real trouble and some real problems. The problem is that there's no mechanisms by which you can, other than complain, you can't see it, because this has never happened. There's no systems in place that would say, all right, if a outgoing administration does this, then you can do that, because it's never happened. We've just acted normal up until this point, to where you try to get a transition from the time of the election until the time of the inauguration. And this is very much breaking with precedent and history and just good manners.
Yeah, good manners, but something has to be done about it. You've got far too long an interregnum between the 5th of November and the 20th of January. It could be told if the incoming administration knew that the outgoing administration would not do anything that would fundamentally wreck the election program of the election winners. But now that we have this situation, it seems to me something that Donald Trump needs to put on the agenda. Now, it's Mad Dog Biden's birthday today, I see. Barack Obama has just wished him a happy birthday. I don't know how sincerely. Would this not be, once he'd eaten his cake, would this not be a good time to raise the issue of the 25th Amendment? Whether Joe Biden is still fit to carry out his duties?
Well, you listen, you just based on the actions and the things that we've seen, and I'm not talking about just in the last week, but gracious, I mean, you can go back into most of the last year and ask a lot of those very valid questions. But, you know, the political reality, I don't have to tell you, you know better than I do, is that in the last 60 days, nobody on the Democratic side would dare to do that, with the possible exception of, and I will say that there's a sliver of a possibility here that Biden could say, oh, you know what, I can't really finish out, so I'm going to hand off to Kamala Harris and let her become the first woman president, so she'll actually break through that, et cetera. You know, so that would certainly make a lot of Democrats happy to finally get in there by whatever means necessary, however short it might be. But I really, really hope that they aren't going to actually do that, because the turmoil would be incredible. And I'm just promising you, you don't want to have Kamala Harris be a temporary president with all of the decision-making powers when you have the two potential wars brewing on the side burners.
Yeah, when you put it like that, Colonel, you're probably right. Let me rescind my previous suggestion. What do you think of the show so far? What do you think of Trump's interim cabinet and the appointments he's made to date?
Well, I gotta admit, some of them have been eyebrow raising. Some of it's unclear how. I get that their mentality and their focus, and there's certainly their loyalty to the Trump focus is certainly there. But there are some others, and I'll just hold up Tulsi Gabbard as the primary one. Even though she's been vilified in some quarters of the United States, she is absolutely, in my view, the absolute perfect and best selection that he's made so far. I would have actually and did actually suggest that she should have been Secretary of State, where she could do the most good, because you know, she is number one, she's a combat veteran. She's still a serving lieutenant colonel, but she has been outspoken from the time she was a Democratic member of Congress, willing to talk to anyone to try to bring peace. She has always been saying, I'll do whatever it takes to end wars, to not fight stupid wars, and to bring peace to those that were fighting. And she has definitely wanted to do that here, which is why I think Trump selected her for this Director of National Intelligence, because that is a hugely important issue. So, and then there's some others like the Tom Homan, I think, of the Border Patrol, and you know, because he's been with the Border Patrol before, so I think he's eminently qualified for that, and he's definitely tied into the Trump agenda. So I think by and large it's good, but like Pete Hegseth, you know, he's got a military background. He's fought with heroism in uniform during combat, and that's all great. But I'm telling you, I worked in the Pentagon for 3 years during my active duty times, and it is going to be a big challenge for him, because he doesn't have any experience handling big organizations like that. So I think they're going to have to do really good on getting him a Deputy Secretary of Defense who does know how to navigate the building and all of the bureaucracy that goes with that. And if so, then I think he might be all right.
Well, may I be the first to propose your good self, sir, Colonel Daniel L. Davis, host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive and all-round officer and gentleman. Thank you, Colonel, for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.